Hello everyone, welcome to another Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward lore tour. The Ethys is sick and no doubt sounding pretty nasally and gross edition. This is going to be St. Mocianne's Arboretum. How do I know that? Well, if it's not, I'm going to keep doing this intro every day for Expert Roulette until it is. So, is this the first take? Is it the 50th take? No one will ever know. Now, first of all, what are we doing here? Well, the residents of Idleshire, they're starting to get serious about the settlement, so they're looking into the agricultural trades. They've been hoping that the Arboretum might yield them some seeds of some kind of Sharlayan engineered supercrop, which may or may not be hallucinogenic. I really wouldn't put it past old Louis Swat to have some kind of magical drug farm. We all know that dude blazes. And that's not a joke about him being Phoenix. Badum-tish. Anyway. God, that was terrible. Marlborough Terra. Terra is Latin for Earth. Obviously, Marlborough, some people seem to think I read too deeply into. They're probably right. So, I'm going to say for now that it's sufficient to say that it's a play on the Marlboro cigarette brand and the whole bad breath thing. The colibri is a genus of large hummingbird, native to South America, and parts of Central America, I believe. It's also the name of an American company which produces cigarette lighters, so it's kind of fun that it appears here with the Marlboro. As for the southern seas, it could be referencing the Ciudades from which the Lalafels were originally native to the south of Vilbrand, or it could mean somewhere much further south, like perhaps the northern coast of Marasidia. Either way, it's the first clue in here that it's more than an arboretum. It's much more than an arboretum. It's more like a global botanic garden and research zoo, I suppose. Anyway, you'll notice as we proceed, the different areas have distinct habitats, and I believe that these are intended to mirror specific regions of Hydaelyn. The Koropakur, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Koropakur? Yeah, I think so. Anyway, they're a Japanese folklore reference. In the indigenous Ainu language of northern Japan, it means something like butterbur people. A butterbur basically being a colt's foot, which are those little weedy sunflowers. You've probably seen them. They're absolutely everywhere. At least here, they're absolutely everywhere. I don't know if you see them much in the northern hemisphere. So they were shy little pixie folk. They lived in little ditches under the butterburs and would trade with the Ainu. Here, of course, they seem literally to be salad people, and presumably a pretty good side to Lalafell. Ochu is obviously an onomatopoeia for a sneeze on one hand. On the other, it's one of those classic fantasy tropes based on the Otyog from the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons in 1977, whom share pretty much the same appearance, but they will often be intelligent and trade favors for sewage, which they eat. They eat poop. They can also give you super tetanus or mega hepatitis or something like that, so they're pretty nasty. So we're currently in telmatology. I think we're about to move on to the next one, but telmatology is a specific study of swamp ecosystems, which presumably involves several different branches of science. And we're coming into limnology, that's right. So limnology is a fair natural progression, I suppose, from the swamp to a study of inland waters, covering once again ecology and geology, biology, chemistry, all of that associated with the lakes and rivers, etc. And the Kopakur are obviously just as happy here as they are in the swamp. Now we'll be coming into zymology. Zymology, it's not an ecological study actually, but the term for the implied sciences associated with fermentation. So winemaking, brewing, bacteria fermenting, literally the use of yeast to convert sugar into ethanol and CO2. So I like to think of this guy as the Sharlayan's organic brewery. They sort of milk him for alcohol, Louis Soir, comes down every morning with his little hat and his little bucket and his little stool, and squeezes some rose schnapps out of the moor. Oh, I'm sorry, making myself laugh with that image. Yeah, milks them for some rose schnapps. So that's what it's spewing at us here. Actually, no. I think what it's spewing here is more likely the byproduct. So it's basically spitting Vegemite at us. This paladin's going to get a pretty nasty yeast infection. Anyway, that's all I've really got on the Rose Garden. So I'll skip ahead here to the next one. Okay, Aramology. You might be able to guess it's a study of deserts, not to be confused with the study of desserts. That would be Aramology with 2 R's, and oh wow, that's a terrible joke, I said that. Favnarian tortoise here, which is quite interesting. We know that the Coeurl is native originally to Favnare, and it seems that they have tortoises as well. Given that this tortoise is both explicitly Favnarian and explicitly in the desert section, it seems to corroborate on what most of us suspect, which is that Favnare evidently has large arid areas in between the more jungle climates that the Coeurls prefer. So it sounds to me, from what else we know about their culture, to be a kind of Hydaelyn Afghanistan, I guess you could say. Again, most people get a Middle Eastern vibe from most of what we know of Favnare, and I think it's pretty reasonable. If you're looking for Favnare references in the game, it's worth keeping in mind that it is either literally or is a large part of the region that Eorzeans refer to as the Near East. So that is where our new friend Ardashir, the anima researcher, is from. Now, if these Arboretum crawlers that we just killed are also from Favnare, they may be very well what we get our Favnarian silk from. What else do we have from Favnare? We obviously have all the glamour items. We have the Favnarian onion, Favnarian mistletoe, Favnarian mist, which we used to upgrade our relics to Zenith, I believe, way back. Favnarian dance. There's a few Favnarian weapons which drop from the library. I think that's pretty much it. Anyway, worker hawks. Well, we've seen these in the hinterlands already. Well, we've seen the tarantula hawks, I should say, which in real life is pretty terrifying. Definitely not a dragon. I'm not going to put a picture up, don't worry, but imagine a wasp roughly 5 centimeters or 2 inches in length that hunts and kills giant fucking tarantulas with a sting that's apparently it's right up there with a bullet ant on the Schmidt Pain Index, if you've ever heard of that. It's some crazy German dude that goes around getting himself stung by things and rating them on a scale of how painful they are. They can be found in the Americas and commonly in, you guessed it, Australia. The sting has been described by victims as something like being electrocuted whilst your blood is converted to hydrofluoric acid. Basically, you immediately lose the ability to do anything but scream for a good 5 minutes, and then you're fine. There's no lasting effect like you'd get from a Sydney funnel web, for instance, which is cool, I guess. It would be nice to know in that, you know, that one moment of clarity between being stung and writhing on the floor that you're not actually about to die. If you've ever been bitten by a venomous spider or something, you probably know the moment I'm talking about. Although if you get impaled by one the size of this, I'm pretty sure you'd be very dead. So I feel pretty sorry for the Sharlayan beekeepers. This had better be some pretty damn good honey. These bees are also probably the main reason that the Arboretum has continued to thrive whilst being sealed up, given that they're obviously continuing to pollinate all the various plants. There was another Orn hornet in there somewhere as well. The Orn is that lowland region that you see to the north of Sharlayan, beyond the waterfall, and the Thaliak River sort of winds upward on the western edge of Blathia's Spine until it reaches the Blood Brine, which is the ocean you can see on the horizon. And there they are, Orn hornet. Now, I don't think there's actually a whole lot to say about the queen hawk other than that most species of wasp don't actually live in a hive with a queen. Some do, but most I believe are solitary and often kleptoparasitic, which means they lay their eggs by injecting them into the bodies of other insects, either dead or alive, and when they hatch they eat their way out. That's some really Scott bullshit right there. Also, of course, wasps don't produce honey because they're scumbags, which raises the question of why the hell I'm assuming that the denizens of this honeycomb are wasps and not bees, really just because the name refers to a wasp. But maybe Eorzean wasps can make honey, why not? Maybe they can interbreed with bees. Or maybe, and I think this is more likely actually now I think of it, these wasps have just killed or enslaved all the bees and moved in to feed on all the poor bees' honey. See, wasps really are scumbags. They're like the Lalafels of the insect world, fucking wasps. We're now entering the study. So, okay, let's talk about Sharlayan architecture. Actually, hold that thought. Let's talk about Boloko. This one's super exciting for me. So Boloko are, to the Mongo peoples of the Congo, a kind of jungle monster. They're often supposed to be the incarnations of ancestor spirits. There's a lot of ancestor worship in those cultures. They eat people, preferably females. They have grass growing all over their bodies instead of hair. And they viciously guard the spoils of the deepest parts of the forest. Now, we already know that we have flora and fauna here collected from throughout Hydaelyn. I'm going to toss a theory in here. I don't think it was a coincidence that we see the Boloko appearing at the same time as a particular addition to our sightseeing log, which I'll put on screen right now. I think it's quite possible that what we're seeing here is the progeny of an ancient Mericidian beast tribe which worshipped Sephiroth the Fiend. I still have no idea how the architecture of the cathedral apparently suggests any such thing, given that the most explicit symbols covering the structure are those of Azima, but there you go. The retort might be that these Boloko are just random mobs and there's no reason to think that they're an intelligent beast race, but you notice that they're not only humanoid, they're actually carrying and using weapons, which is something I think we can assume requires a fairly sophisticated level of intelligence compared to other plant-based monsters like the Morbol or the Ochu. So that's my working theory for the moment. If it turns out that there's a direct connection between the Boloko and the Warring Tribe, you heard it here first. Royal Oak is obvious enough, and Malaya is a genus within the mahogany family. They're named for the Meliae, which were Greek nymphs born from the blood spilled by the castration of Ouranos by Kronos, and became the ancestors of Bronze Age man, effectively. They were conflated with the ash tree, and so they're often used in fantasy as tree nymphs. Well, we're coming up here to Belladonna. I want to draw attention to the Sharlayan structures up there on the bark. They're likely some kind of, I guess, a climate control mechanism. But the most interesting thing to me is that they're quite conspicuously reminiscent of something we might see in Alexander. So I think that a Sharlayan is still my primary suspect for the author of the Enigma Codex. Anyway, Belladonna is something you see quite often in pop culture, particularly in film and music. Atropa belladonna is the proper name for deadly nightshade, so it's a pretty ready name for a femme fatale or a female killer or similar. It was used as a poison to kill a bunch of ancient Romans, including Augustus Caesar. European witches and shamans would use it to trip balls, and some idiots probably still do, despite it having a very good chance to kill you. And fun Tolkien fact for the day, Belladonna Took was actually the name of Bilbo Baggins' mother. Atropine spores we saw there was the other big AoE, the one that I didn't fucking get hit by like an idiot. Atropine, it's a compound found in Atropa belladonna, obviously, that causes extreme tachycardia and hallucinations, but it's also a very important medicine used to treat bradycardia, which is the opposite, obviously, when your heart rate is too low. It can also treat the more deadly effects of other poisons, and particularly nerve gases. So it actually became quite common in World War I for Allied troops that would expect to be targeted with chlorine gas to carry atropine injectors. I imagine it's something still used today by operatives at risk of being targeted with chemical weapons, or of course the people that are PvPing against summoners. Anyway, the whole point of this is that Belladonna here was probably an important part of Sharlayan medical research, particularly something that they would have been studying when the Garlands first showed up. And there were some concerns about the kinds of advanced weaponry the Empire might be fielding. They might be overthinking it, but I do believe there should be a canonical explanation for everything we find in particularly a dungeon like this. Anyway, I was trying to talk before about the Sharlayan architecture, and I mentioned it in the library, but I'll mention it again here because, well, it's fascinating, and that's that it's in here and in the library across Idyllshire and the hinterlands. We see a repetition of this symbol of the logarithmic spiral. You can see it on the tiles on the floor here. It's a self-similar curve, which means that the angle of the line to the radius remains exactly the same regardless of how large it becomes. That may or may not seem significant to people. I don't know, if you're a maths nerd, then you're probably all over that. But it was very important to mathematicians and the metaphysician Descartes in particular, who discovered it, because it's something that occurs so commonly in nature, like in shells, ram horns, spiral galaxies, storm systems, corneal nerves. Going to give a bard a commendation here. The approach of hawks, their prey, moths to a lamp. Basically, the strongest argument for that old Platonic position that maths and particularly geometry is the pure and perfect way to describe phenomena, and more or less the language of God. Anyway, that's another Law 2 done, and you can probably hear that I'm rapidly losing my voice. I really do hope you found it enjoyable and informative. Let me know if you have any thoughts of your own about anything we discussed, or if you think I missed anything interesting or important. Like, sub, share if you're enjoying the series and would like to see more. But for now, I'm Ethys, and thank you all so much for watching.